Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of WrestleNomics Radio. I'm Brandon Thurston, broadcasting live and on demand from Buffalo, New York, where today is Sunday, June 11th, 2023. And I'm joined for the first time in a couple weeks by both Chris Gullo. Hello. Say hello.
Hello. It's good to be back.
And Jesse Collins.
Yes.
How are you?
We're doing like a brand split thing, but this is like the pay-per-view that me and Gullo have to get along by being together.
A soft brand split. It's not strictly enforced. Sometimes one of you is here, sometimes the other.
Only if one of us challenges the other person, then they can be on the other show.
Yes, we're renaming our titles and things of that nature. So, do you want to tell us, Gullo, about where you were last week?
Well, 2 weeks ago, I was in Asheville, North Carolina, and it's a city I've been kind of scoping out, but possibly living there in the future. And
Are you going to leave Buffalo? You're going to betray Buffalo, New York?
Buffalo's given me everything it has, so we're looking at other options. So no, I'm looking at possibly living in a tiny house community out there. It's a very vegan-friendly city. I love my craft beer, so there's their nickname Beer City. They fight Grand Rapids for it. So like,
do you watch the tiny house videos on YouTube?
Yes, yeah,
we do. With the New Zealand guy, the guy from New Zealand.
Probably. Listen, I've watched so many. My wife has sent me so many tiny house videos. They all kind of blended together. But
so yeah. People may not understand what you're talking about, especially Americans. Yes. A tiny house is what?
It is a house that's, I mean, it could be less than that, but normally it's around like 250 feet to about 400 square feet. Once it gets past 400, it's debate if it's a tiny house or not, but it's literally everything in that little space. Your kitchen, your bathroom, your living room. Usually there'll be a loft to the bedroom.
It's very condensed. It's very space efficient, right?
Yes. Space efficient, minimalistic. It's supposed to also help cut down on water use and electric use. And, it's supposed to be really reducing your carbon footprint more.
So that you can feel like you're better than other people. Is that what it's about?
Maybe not. Just joking. But yeah, I tell you, I stayed in one to get the experience, and it was surprisingly more comfortable than I thought it was going to be. So
okay. Anything new, Jesse? How are the Celtics doing in the playoffs here?
The Celtics lost. They're long gone.
Okay. Yes. The NBA Finals are game 5. No, 6. No, 5.
Yeah, game 5 is Monday night.
Monday versus Raw. And then they're free and clear of wrestling ratings because if Game 7, if necessary, will be on Thursday, or no, Game 6, if necessary, will be on Thursday. I don't know when Game 7 will be. I was looking at this just a little while ago. But anyway, we will talk today about Roman Reigns, his the big rating celebration, the big 1,000-day title reign celebration, and things of that nature. We'll talk about AEW Collision, which is debuting this coming Saturday. Can you believe in when we record this show again 7 days from now, AEW Collision will be in the books. We won't have a rating yet for it. Jesse just reminded me that we may have, by the time we record, maybe there'll be a Fast National out there, but who knows? And we will discuss AEW house shows, maybe some pay-per-view buys, and things of that nature. But if you want to participate today with the Super Chat, if you're watching live on YouTube, you are encouraged to Super Chat, and we will read your question live or your comment live on the air here. So we have some housekeeping here. So Pollock and Thurston is now, I think officially, a weekly podcast that's happening both on the Post Wrestling feed and on the WrestleNomics radio feed. That's me and John Pollock. We're having a guest almost every time we're having a guest. That's in the middle of the week. That's on our YouTube channels as well, free for everybody. And that means we're changing our strategy a little bit here. So it's still going to be the case. WrestleNomics Radio, this podcast that you're listening to right now, will still be free every first episode of the month, every Sunday, the first Sunday of the month, beginning in July the first episode of the month will still be free. But then after that, beginning July 9th, this will be a Patreon-only podcast. This has to do with some scheduling things to help out post-wrestling. This will also, because there's a Pollock and Thurston podcast that's happening that is free, I've decided I want to put something that's really good behind the paywall for our subscribers. There's no difference in the price. It's not a $10 tier, a $20 tier, a $1,000 tier. It's still $5 for everybody, in addition to everything else that's part of the Patreon. And I think we're going to work out a way so that subscribers, if you're listening to this Patreon-only podcast, you do not have to do a super chat to ask a question. We'll have you like at WrestleNomics. You can ask all the questions that you want, and we'll really unleash the subscribers' thoughts into this podcast, perhaps. And do I have anything else here? This is what the Patreon completely offers, all that stuff. And we will have another guest this coming week for Pollock and Thurston, which will be one of our biggest guests that we've yet had. I believe it will be revealed, a major announcement. It will be a major announcement that will be revealed on Rewind to Raw with John and Way tomorrow on Monday night when they review Raw. So check that out.
Are they going to cut away from the show and then get John Pollock reading very reading a piece of paper to announce
perhaps
who the new person is going to be?
Perhaps. I don't know what you're referring to there, but okay. So
you don't know what I'm referring to?
Yes, I yes I do. I do know what you're referring to. Yes. So first, WWE. I do have the fast affiliate for last night's show. It's not as high as this one, but last week Friday. This was what day was this? I don't know. June. Let me look at the calendar here. June 2nd on Fox. No NBA competition to go up against. The SmackDown rating was down the last few weeks here. You can see in the line chart. SmackDown was not as high as it had been. Still a little bit over 2 million viewers, but this one, 2.5 million viewers. 2.563 million viewers for SmackDown on Fox. 0.73 in the demo. Blew away everything else on television on Friday in the demo. For the Roman Reigns 1,000 day celebration. We have the quarter hours here in video on the screen here, and you can see the dotted line chart showing you what the normal trend is here. I mean, all the quarters were above where this show usually is, but the last two quarters especially went way up. 2.9 million viewers was what the final 15 minutes of this show averaged. And in terms of a demo rating, the final 15 minutes of this show averaged a 0.87. 0.87 in the demo was the P18 to 49 national rating. 2.9 million viewers. I have not seen minute by minutes, but it's possible that some of these minutes were over 3 million viewers. In any case, this is the highest single quarter hour that in my relatively limited data set I've ever seen. Since early 2022, I believe all of the quarter hours for all the major W shows. I have all the quarter hours for all of the AW shows ever, and I do not have a quarter hour data point as big as this one was for the final 15 minutes with the Roman Reigns and the Usos and Solo Sikoa celebrating the 1,000 day title reign of Roman Reigns and all the bloodline storyline stuff unfolding there. So I usually say that quarter hours, it's easy. They're pretty ambiguous. You can, think any narrative into some of this stuff, but sometimes it's pretty undeniable. And the combination of the show itself apparently drove a lot of tune-in. The entire show was highly viewed, and especially the thing that pretty almost undeniably here is driving why people were tuning in. You look at the last two quarter hours, which was almost entirely that angle, and that's what really drove viewership up. So I think that's a pretty clear case. We did have, I guess I put this other slide here. This is the Dynamite quarter hours, and we did have the MJF and Adam Cole promo, which appeared to pop the rating here throughout the course of Dynamite on Wednesday night. to a decent degree. I mean, up 11% from quarter to quarter. It had no ads in it. And by the way, I guess there was an ad break between, I guess, Triple H giving Reigns the title and then Reigns and the Usos having their meet and greet. So no ads there, and I think things do get a little bit ambiguous here. This is a mildly strong case, I would say, for the Adam Cole and MJF promo, just because the margin versus the usual trend was so large. We're talking about a 10-point difference or a 12-point difference here, and in total viewership in the demo, it's like a 10-point difference. So usually I like these boxes up when they're a 5-point difference, and as opposed to this was a 14-point difference in the demo, 11-point difference in total viewership, and then it continues to grow in the following quarter. So I would say, this is sort of a mild case of I'm willing to attribute success to the content here, versus this one, which is, I think this final segment is pretty attributable to this entire course being up a lot higher than it usually is. I mean, you factor in the lack of NBA competition as well. But what drove SmackDown to have its highest rating of the year so far, its highest demo since the Christmas 2020 episode that had the NFL lead-in, I have to give credit to, where is he? I know we'll talk about YouTube. There he is. There he is. He looked straight into the camera. I don't know if Jesse Collins saw this, but I feel like he was looking at you. Did you get that sense?
That he was looking at me?
Yes.
I actually haven't seen the segment, so this is the first time I'm seeing this still image.
He did it in vain. Then he looked at he was saying something about acknowledgement, and then he looked right into the camera, and he looked at you, I think, and said, "Acknowledge me."
Well, if there's one thing WWE trained wrestlers are good at, it's looking right into the camera. That's
very
the
rare.
number one thing that they do.
Yes,
No, but this is what you want. This is what you want, right? If you're WWE, you spent 1,000 days putting the title. It's a 1,000-day title celebration, which means he's had the title for 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. They've obviously been teasing the descent between, the Usos and Roman Reigns for years. They've tiptoed towards the line. They've gone back towards it. They got pretty close to doing it. Then one of them got arrested, so they had to back off. And so this is what you want, though, if you're WWE. It's just, if we're going to start actually doing this storyline, executing the breakup after teasing it for years and years, a lot of people are interested in it. So it's a huge success from that perspective, in that sense. Do you get, I don't know, I guess you could say it is, were people tuning in because they wanted to see Roman Reigns get a new title and celebrate his 1,000 days? Or were people tuning in because they knew that there was going to be something involving the Usos and Roman Reigns? It's probably a combination of both. I'd seem to think it's towards the latter. I think people are more interested in the storyline development rather than just a celebration of 1,000 days.
I think the milestone was a good promotional vehicle to help gather awareness that this is happening, and the combination of the angle that happened on the Saudi Arabia show. Intriguing.
And it'll be very interesting because I think that we're gonna, if they're starting to move the ball forward on this storyline, it's probably going to be a very slowly progressing storyline. I assume it's going to take weeks and weeks and months for it to be fully explored. So it'll be interesting to see how much of that viewership they can maintain. Theoretically, if this is just the first step of the implosion, you would want to see the number keep going up and up. I don't know if that's really feasible given how big this first number was in terms of the storyline. I know they were down this past week, although that has probably a lot to do with the competition that they were facing.
The NBA Finals was Friday night.
Yeah.
And it looks like it's going to be, what did I say on Twitter? It looks like around 1.4 to 1. I'll keep talking. I'll tell you in a minute.
1.4 to 1.5?
I don't think it's that high. No. I said 2.29 to 2.41.
Yeah. But still pretty good, even compared to the previous final weeks, right? Or NBA playoff competition weeks.
Yes.
Above what they had been doing the previous 3 or 4 weeks before this big number. But it'll be interesting to see, especially as we get to the summer and the competition on Friday nights becomes even less competitive with both the NBA finals and the NHL playoffs wrapping up probably this week. Where how I think how consistent is the interest in the storyline? Are they going to be doing a 0.72, 0.73, or higher each week? Um, how much higher are they going to be doing than what they were doing before? I think that'll be really interesting to see because, logically speaking, if this is only the first chapter, there should be a lot more potential intrigue and interest if they continue to deliver what fans expect.
Yeah. And if we look at YouTube, so I what I did, this is another report that's on the Patreon. I looked at the top 25 videos for WWE throughout May. So this is the criteria here is the video had to be published, or to be more technical here, my script had to find it for the first time sometime within the month of May. And then the most viewed video is Jimmy Uso did what to Roman Reigns. These are highlights of the WWE Night of Champions pay-per-view that did 3.7 million views at last count anyway. Carlito making his return is another big one. I grade out here the things that are just generic highlights. Bad Bunny versus Damian Priest. Cody Rhodes tries to ambush Brock Lesnar. Cody Rhodes versus Brock Lesnar highlights of the Backlash pay-per-view. Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa want the tag team titles. Jimmy Uso, I am the tribal chief. Massive reveal, 12 superstars announced for the World Championship, Heavyweight Championship. The Usos, no good, very bad day. I feel like I'm just saying random words now. Zayn and Owens versus Reigns and Sikoa. Road to Night of Champions and Styles. Something with Seth Rollins here. So there's a lot of bloodline stuff within that, as well as some Cody and Brock, and of course some Bad Bunny. Of course Carlito in there.
To add on what Jesse said, the bloodline storyline, how much momentum can it carry through the summer? You know, the big thing with that June 2nd rating was, yes, you had the 1,000 days, but you also had the NBA Finals the night before and the NHA Finals the next day. So there was literally no competition at all. Can they carry a similar rating all through the summer when there is no competition?
Huge
with how
shade
successful the
casted by
storyline is.
Briscoe on
No,
Shark Tank.
I acknowledge the tribal chief. Don't get me wrong. I acknowledge the tribal chief. It's just, it's the summer. And summer,
You're not acknowledging Mark Cuban's Shark Tank, though, apparently.
I've been on here, I've acknowledged her, but I'm interested to see because they've taken the storyline now into another direction. They're really stretching this. I mean, and it's been successful so far. But
I mean, I think Roman Reigns has never been more of a difference maker relative to his peers in this time. You know, we've done the episode. I don't want to do the episode again about whether or not Roman Reigns is a draw. I think the ultimate conclusion that people would be interested in the answer to is that I think yes, he's making a difference now. I think there's reasonable questions around was it an efficient investment since 2014 or 2015? Obviously, Vince and WWE put a lot of resources into getting him over, and it could have clearly, to my view, been done in a more efficient way than it was. In any case, in this time, 2023, in this title reign, I think as a really key component, he has become a very important star and the central star to a storyline that no Sami Zayn here, by the way. No Sami Zayn in this.
Well,
this
I think
single.
it's totally indisputable at this moment that Roman Reigns and the Bloodline is the biggest drawing act right now in WWE. As far as terms, and this rating really hammers that home. That yes, you can say that his working with Cody, obviously Cody was a big star, and obviously the Sami Zayn feud and things like that. You could say Sami Zayn was the real big star as far as like drawing interest, but I think definitely, especially related to this rating, that Roman and in the Bloodline and the Usos and the whole storyline is the main driving factor for this number being as large as it was, and it was really because people were interested in that, and that the quarter hours show that. I know the quarter hours, like you mentioned, are not perfect, and that you can't extrapolate too much from them. But when the difference is that big, it makes sense.
Yes, I think I want to say, and I guess this is, I'm sensing this is a little bit of my own taste of influencing. But I think the long title reign has really supported the storyline as being important. Like the main character here is Roman Reigns, and he is important because he appears dominant, because he has been the champion and has not been beaten for 1,000 days.
Yeah, I'd hope so. That's all basic booking, though. Like, yeah, you would imagine that the person that you never beat feels important. And sometimes WWE struggled to do that. A lot of times with their baby faces, they beat them all the time and then wonder why nobody cares about them. But obviously, booking someone to be completely unbeatable for years and years and years makes them feel important. And having them never lose the title makes the title, therefore, feel important. This is the most successful title reign WWE has had as far as adding prestige to a title, making a title feel important. Eventually, when he loses the title, it's probably going to be hugely important. This is the most successful of that period that WWE has had in a long, long time because they've actually committed to something for a long period of time.
Yeah. The most successful title reign since who should we stop at? Bruno?
I mean, I don't know. Like you could, yeah. So like, as far as like an extremely long title reign, you'd have to go back probably to like Hulk Hogan,
I
right?
guess Hogan, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I would say like, I mean, I would go back to things like John Cena's original world title reign, which I think really firmly established him after he beat JBL at WrestleMania 21. And there were some hiccups. He wasn't perfect after he wasn't super, super, duper, duper over after he won that title. But I think that original title reign really firmly established John Cena as the next big star in WWE. And that led to 10 years of him being a really huge difference maker for them on whenever he would be on shows. So that's probably as far back as I would go. But you could go back further as far as like the length of a title reign, making a title feel important.
Yeah. So, and just to look at the AEW YouTube views as we just did for WWE, AEW, their YouTube channel, they do things a little bit differently. They don't put out highlights or top tens like WWE does for each TV show. So it's basically all TV segments. The steel cage match between Omega and Moxley was the #1 video for May for AEW's official YouTube channel, followed by Sabu. The return of Sabu was a YouTube draw anyway, and some other things. I won't read through them all. If you're looking at the video on YouTube or if you want to look at the slides later, that's all in there. I don't know if you see anything interesting. Either of you coming off of this, we've got, I don't know, Naturally Limitless and the Mogul affiliates. The Double or Nothing pay-per-view main event, the firm deletion at the Hardy compound, Adam Cole is furious with Chris Jericho, Saraya steals the victory for the Outcasts, and Sheeta returns. The list goes on there. So, there he is. Again, if you want to submit a super chat, go ahead. So, in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, I had Jesse find this for me. So, Dave wrote in the Wrestling Observer newsletter this week about pay-per-view buys for AEW. For the second show in a row, AEW television pay-per-view numbers have grown tremendously in the second week after the show. Between what was reported on June 1 and June 7, there was a 12.8% increase in buys. Right now, the number for Double or Nothing is up almost 1% from that of Revolution, the same number of days after the show. So that would indicate probably 140,000 or more buys, depending on how the next 2 weeks go. But given most of the predictions going in regarding the idea the main event was weak or the main event build was weak or whatever, at the end of the day, the numbers wound up in the same range as Forbidden Door, around 140,000. With late buys, Revolution finished slightly ahead of those shows. And this show, based on same-day numbers, is very slightly ahead of that figure. So if I'm understanding this right, this will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 5th consecutive show that's around 140,000. I feel fairly confident in the numbers all out and before, and I haven't been following this and asking as aggressively as I have in the past about the ones following it. At the Full Gear press conference after the Full Gear pay-per-view in November, I asked Tony, and he said around 140. And granted, that's with digital, basically. They probably know digital that night. They don't know the count of traditional as well. And I believe after Revolution, I was not there for Revolution in San Francisco, but I believe after Revolution, he said something similar about buys for Revolution. Dave here saying Revolution with late buys finished a little bit above 140, and Double or Nothing looking to be a little bit above 140, depending on how the traditional pay-per-view buys get counted. So I guess that's encouraging considering other factors post CM Punk not being around for almost a year have been weaker. in terms of TV ratings, in terms of ticket sales. So these are better numbers than I would expect. Would you agree?
Right. When you look at, like you said, attendance and TV ratings have dipped since September of 2022. Um, I would, you know, I think having only, I guess, 5 pay-per-views now a year helps in the sense that people are willing to make that quarterly commitment kind of regardless of whether or not they're as tuned in to the week to week product as they would be, especially because the shows tend to hold obviously a high standard. Like Revolution obviously was a very well received pay per view. Double or Nothing really was not uh, nearly as well received as Revolution, but I think that most fans see them as a worthwhile. People that have been buying them see them as a worthwhile investment, and it's made that investment may transcend um, the kind of week to week habitual watching that maybe has declined in certain ways.
I would
If
say,
that makes sense.
I mean, pay per view is the product that is for your most loyal fans, your most hardcore fans. And I don't mean like hardcore in the they like a certain kind of wrestling hardcore, but hard to break fans, you know. And that these are the people that are furthest down the funnel. You'll have the people who are higher up on the funnel, who are kind of on the fringes, who may fall in and out of television viewing, may fall in and out of going to a show, but the people who are, who have committed to one way or another watching this pay per view and driving somebody to spend $50, that hasn't changed as much.
Yeah, and well, I also think anecdotally, like I think there are a decent amount of people, probably more than people think, that don't watch Dynamite each week, but are fairly loyal pay per view buyers. I think there are people that understand that they may not have the time or the interest in watching 2 hours of Dynamite every single week, but every few months when the pay per view rolls around, they're familiar with the stars and they're familiar with the kind of presentation of AEW's product. They're going to make that purchase. I know anecdotally, of course, several people that I know that are not necessarily regular watchers of AEW, but tend to watch most of the pay per views, and I know that they purchased Double or Nothing, and I heard them say that they enjoyed the show more than a lot of the hardcore fans that I know said. So I do think that the infrequency of the show combined with the standard quality um, allows people who maybe even if they're not super invested week to week in the product to make the decision to purchase the pay-per-view. Kind of similar how people will maybe not watch WWE for stretches of time, but will always watch the Royal Rumble, always watch WrestleMania, always watch SummerSlam. And it's not necessarily because they're super invested in certain storylines that are popping up in those pay per view events. Just that they understand that those are big events that they are going to watch kind of regardless of the build. I do think that's a segment of the pay per view buying audience, and probably one of the explanations for why the pay per view buy number is very similar.
Yeah, I was I think listening between the sheets and listening to them talk about a TNA pay per view from about 10 years ago and what it did in buys, and just thinking about what TNA was delivering on pay per view. It was in at that time. I mean, at a time where I don't think there was a digital option, right? So that's what they were doing on traditional pay per view is what they were doing on pay per view, period. And they were doing in the tens of thousands, right? I believe their highest is something around 60,000 for one of it was like the Joe and Angle cage match.
Yeah, that's the highest one. Yeah,
60,000, and I mean AEW has never done a pay per view that low. And consider, I mean, it's a different TV landscape, so it's not a like to like comparison. But in I guess it just illustrates why this is a complicated way to do the conversion. Is that I mean, what was Impact Wrestling doing on Spike back in the day? Like 1 million viewers, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
like
1.1,
1.2.
1.2. Yeah,
Yeah.
So now, if you want to adjust that for cord cutting now, it would be a lot lower. But that's even bearing that in mind. I think there's something different that's happening economically with TNA in that era, as it concerns pay per view, and AEW in this era as it concerns pay per view. Sure, people are, I think, consuming AEW content in different ways, or getting by on social media, or are, watching in other ways that aren't measured by the Nielsen ratings. But the conversion of people who are probably following this promotion in however following is meant. I think we all have a grasp of what I mean. But like, people are following this promotion to a certain degree, and they are buying pay-per-views to a far greater degree than they apparently were for TNA back in the day.
Well, yeah, and you can also look at live attendance. Like TNA could never sell tickets anywhere close to the way that AEW sells tickets.
Why is that?
Um,
What's the difference? Like, these are both number two promotions in their era in the United States.
well, I would say that Dynamite has bigger stars. Dynamite has a better product. Dynamite has a better reputation. Um,
TNA
Dynamite
had
has
Hulk
better.
Hogan. They had Kurt Angle.
Yeah, I went to the baseball. There was a show at the Buffalo Bison's baseball stadium. It was TNA Live, and it had Hulk Hogan, Kurt Angle, Scott Steiner, Jeff Jarrett. It was stacked, but I think the product is where Jesse's. I think
Jeff Jarrett's on TNA. I mean, Jeff Jarrett's in
Yeah.
AEW. I mean, they can say they
It
had.
doesn't do
names,
bad in his rating either.
right? Well, I mean, obviously, like TNA had names, but they were almost all people who were past their prime. AEW has John Moxley. AEW has Kenny Omega. AEW has Bryan Danielson. AEW has these people that are still wrestling. And I mean, the product is better. I think the audience is more accepting of a number two brand because WWE is not as strong as they were in the late 2000s, and their time has gone by. Now WWE is probably stronger than they were then. But when AEW first started, there was obviously a hunger and a desire for the audience. I mean, Impact in that era is a terrible product. It's really bad. There's the mistakes that they made are countless.
How
in terms
important
of
is the brand, and what the TNA brand represented then, and what the AEW brand represents now?
I think being a hot new brand has a lot of value. Years ago, I was talking to an independent promoter, and we were talking about All In, the original All In, and I asked, how come All In, which is really just a Ring of Honor show, it's got mainly the same talent that you could see on any big Ring of Honor show. How come the show that doesn't have the Ring of Honor branding has been able to sell out the arena in Chicago, and obviously they ended up doing a big number on pay-per-view relative to its expectations.
They're about 45,000.
Yeah. Right, which makes it feel low on that chart, but at the time was seen as a massive success.
Yeah.
And I remember asking, like, how come that show is so wildly successful in a way that like a Ring of Honor show has never been? And the promoter, just in his own opinion, said, well, the Ring of Honor brand is stale and isn't seen as like this innovative company.
Yeah.
As opposed to these guys, even though it's largely the same talent, come across as if they're doing something new and exciting, and fans are going to rally around that. And the Ring of Honor brand didn't have any real negative. I don't think had like that strong negative connotations the way like a TNA brand did, where people had kind of already dismissed TNA. I just think that Ring of Honor had kind of reached its climax as a independent wrestling brand that people could get excited about. And the idea of these new wrestlers banding together was an exciting idea that got people into watching the show. And that's why All In was so successful. And I think that's one of the reasons AEW has been successful, is because it has largely been advertised and as leveraged as, we are going to do something historic. We are going to do something that hasn't been done in 20 years. And that is create a true alternative. We have, a strong television deal on a cable network that most homes get. We have a very wealthy owner that is willing to invest a lot of money in this thing, that also understands pro wrestling. And to this day, AEW uses the model. I think like one of the reason the Wembley Stadium show has been so successful is largely based on the idea that people feel like they're going to go to a stadium show that hasn't been done by WWE. The first stadium show in Europe that hasn't been done by WWE since Jim Londos was in Greece, in the 1940s, the idea that this is a historic thing and that you as a wrestling fan are going to want to participate in it in some way, whether that's going live or buying it on pay-per-view or whatever, that's a powerful marketing tool. And it's something that you eventually can't use once the company becomes established. So if you want to go back to like TNA back in the 2010s, TNA had already been established and they'd already kind of reached their ceiling as a brand. I mean, the Samoa Joe Kurt Angle pay-per-view, that's not that pay-per-view buys were done not when TNA was doing its highest television ratings. TNA would do higher television ratings a few years later, but they never sold as many pay-per-views.
I think there's something to. And these are just anecdotes, but I've not heard anecdotes about, and I'm sure there are exceptions, but you don't hear people telling stories about when they traveled to go to see the TNA show. I mean, the virtue of their big events not selling tickets usually that well, I think is evidence of that, versus the people who traveled from around the world to go to All In. I mean, I went to Chicago from Buffalo. The people traveling who will travel from around Europe and the rest of the world to go to the Wembley show for AEW. There's something about the traveling fan that W has benefited from too, that adds to the brand value or is indicative of other kinds of consumer sales like pay-per-view, I think.
I think AEW is on the pulse of social media and what people want on the internet. And you know, people say, oh, the internet is such a small factor. Nick Khan will say that, you know, like, but I mean, the matches they're putting out, the talent that people are excited in, like that is what you see all over Twitter and all over Facebook. And TNA never did that. TNA would put Sting versus Kurt Angle 5 years after it was already done 16 times. Like, we just got to put the
names
former,
though.
I understand that, but at that time, you know, you notice when Hogan and them came in, Samoa Joe wasn't featured as prominently. They tried to turn AJ Styles into Ric Flair. They didn't focus on the talent that people wanted to see, new, exciting, innovative talent. And that's what AEW does as far as the internet. And WWE does it to a certain extent too.
TNA was run largely by people that did not understand pro wrestling in the modern sense. And most of their ideas were trying to rehash ideas that had worked in previous generations of fans. AEW, while has its flaws from a creative aspect, is much closer to presenting a product the way people want it, and generally satisfy fans, and doesn't really frustrate fans that much. If they frustrate fans, it's things like the CM Punk and the Brawl Out not being able to deliver those kind of matches. But by and large, the fan base is satisfied, as opposed to with TNA. It was often a struggle. I think the other thing is, like, I remember asking someone this. This was back when New Japan was running in the United States. One of their early shows. I don't know if it was like the Long Beach show or the G1 event they had in Dallas or something like that. But I remember reading and saying, like, the amount of New Japan World subscribers from the United States was very low. It was something like 10,000 people. Yet New Japan could come to the United States and sell 6,000 tickets. And I remember asking, you know, how is that possible? How can New Japan only have 10,000 subscribers in the United States, yet for a live show they can sell almost, half of all New Japan World subscribers going to one event? I find that hard to believe in.
Because where are the people from who are buying those tickets? In market?
I assume some are, but I assume a lot were flying in. But even then, just saying, like, half, that would be like if WWE would WWE has 1 million subscribers to the WWE network, so they can sell 500,000 tickets to an event, right? It's a huge percentage of your subscriber base to a live event. But I guess, how it was explained to me was that, so many people watching New Japan, not through New Japan World, but they watch through GIFs and they watch through YouTube videos, and some of them are probably pirating them or whatever. But a big thing was that it wasn't necessarily like all these people that were buying tickets were the hardcore, I'm going to, wake up at 2 a.m. East Coast time to start watching this New Japan show live, but people that just were hungry for an alternative, that were enthusiastic about another, wrestling company that is a professional outfit that holds themselves to a high standard that isn't WWE. And that's where a lot of the enthusiasm for New Japan came from. It was because of this thirst, and that was because WWE wasn't satisfying fans, and TNA, which was always around, also wasn't doing that. So it allowed for a company like New Japan without being able to get people excited, even if those people weren't necessarily watching the shows each week.
And I think we've seen with New Japan, they're sort of run of the mill shows that are not very big shows, where you're probably not going to drive almost any traveling fans. Those will do in the hundreds in the United States. But if they have a really big show, you can get people traveling in and draw thousands instead. So, moving on to AEW House Rules. The Observer also reported this week that there are no more house shows scheduled for AEW. Unclear if there will be any more scheduled in the at least immediate future. So I went through the cards here to see what exactly is being booked here. There have been five AEW house shows. One in March, 2 in May, 2 here in early June. Troy, small markets: Troy, Ohio; Corbin, Kentucky; Salem, Virginia; Tupelo, Mississippi; Huntsville, Alabama. I probably couldn't tell you where any of those are on a map beyond what state they're in.
Tupelo isn't really a small market because it's a suburb of Memphis.
Is it really? Okay. It's way up there in Mississippi, I guess.
I think Tupelo is like probably like maybe
the Tupelo
30
Stand
minutes from
Brawl.
Memphis, I'm just guessing.
This is the mustard brawl with
concessions.
concessions. Yes,
it's actually 90 minutes outside Memphis. I thought it was closer.
Okay. So I guess I want to look at the cards here. I'm wondering, should I just read through all of these cards? I guess one of the premises of the Valley of. Yep.
What point do you want to make with the cards?
Well, is one of the values of house shows is supposed to be that given experienced wrestlers who don't have house shows, who wrestle on television maybe infrequently, they're not getting enough match reps. And what I'm seeing here in the cards is that, well, who's working these shows? It's a lot of people with either a lot of experience, period, or a lot of people who've already worked the indies quite a bit. What I don't see here is I don't know, the Jade Cargills of the world who've most of their wrestling experiences within AEW, and they're not present here. A lot of Ethan Page. Some Blackpool Combat Club. Another point I want to make here is, what's the star power like here for these shows? And it's the biggest names we have here are Jon Moxley, Adam Page, FTR, Dev Claudio. Got Pat Buck getting some reps in here with Powerhouse Hobbs and QT Marshall. A lot of Christopher Daniels. Sort of, if anything, we're seeing some wrestlers who are like working in dual roles as producers or other office jobs who are getting some reps in here. Sean Dean, who books the extras or something, right?
Yes.
Orange Cassidy. There's no Chris Jericho here, obviously, right? There's no Elite. There's no Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. So these are really kind of B shows.
Yeah, it seems like these house shows are built around Darby, Orange Cassidy, and like if you have like Jon Moxley, those are the biggest like star power on those. Seems to be Darby Allin.
The Guns do
heavily.
Yeah, the Guns do fit the criteria of people who have not had a lot of experience pre or outside of AEW who are on these shows.
Hook as well.
Hook, that's true. Yeah. Anna Jay is on one of these at least. Yeah.
Yeah, so, Anna Jay's on one. Sky Blue is on one.
Yeah. Yep. And there's another one for Anna Jay. Okay, I guess I don't know if these are going to continue, and maybe that's just part of what are you going to do? What are you going to do a tour of house shows for when you have AEW Collision shows to do? And one question I would have is how, when some of these Collision dates were booked, were they originally supposed to be house shows, or were they booked with it already in mind that these were going to be AEW Collision shows? We just don't have a lot of clarity into what the timing was there, I think.
Well, weren't the Canadian ones originally supposed to be house shows?
They were announced that way, I believe, yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't there one show, like the Regina show, that like they didn't say it was a house show, but they didn't say it wasn't. It didn't say it was television taping, and people were kind of using that as a clue that some Saturday show was coming.
Yeah, that sounds right. Um, so I guess that's a question for. Yeah, go ahead.
What do you make of the house show attendance? Like I know people, oh, they didn't draw well. Like, what does I would be interested in seeing. Like, it seems to be about, if you look at that house show data, it seems to be about half of what a television taping would do, roughly speaking. Um, and I wonder how that compares to WWE. Like, do WWE house shows do about half what the television has been doing over the last 90 days? Probably depends a lot on the market, but I'd be curious to know like what is an AEW's house show percentage compared to what WWE's house show percentages is kind of like kind of a direct comparison as far as how important are these house shows seen as by fans compared to how important WWE fans see WWE house shows.
Okay, let's see. Um, Now this is including some international, which tend to be higher, but let's say the
Yeah.
last we've got. So let's look at the last two quarters, I guess. Right, 6,200 is what they're averaging Q2 to date for a house show. 5,300 in the prior quarter Q1 versus okay 50, 62, 5,300, and then if we look at Raw and SmackDown, it's doing 9,000 to 10,000 for SmackDown, 9,000 to 10,000 for Raw. So is that about half?
No, it's a
It's
little
about
bit more than it's about
that's almost,
two thirds.
almost.
We're talking about 6,000 compared to 9,000.
Yeah, it's a little more than half.
Yeah, and a lot of that, a lot of it's going to come down to market. You mentioned international shows, which are obviously sometimes some of those international house shows are the biggest attendances WWE does all year.
Yeah, and there's
Uh,
probably little to none of that in Q1, and there's definitely some of that in Q2.
mhm. Yeah, I was just curious to see. Like, I know people say like, "Oh, 1,500 fans," it's like terrible, and I was like, I don't know, I don't know what their expectations were for these shows. I don't know if they were bought shows. Um, I would say the first show, the 3,000 number, is a great number. Subsequently, I'm not sure.
Yes, which we've it was like 2,900 and something according to the. I think that's paid according to the records request we did. The report is out there. So yeah, we'll see if that continues. The records request did indicate that the Troy, Ohio show in Hobart Arena, the first house rules house show that they did, had some sort of bought show type element to assure profitability. So it wasn't just AEW doing the show on its own, but there was some third party that was involved to give them, I think, something like a minimum guarantee. So anyway, AEW Collision. These are the latest numbers from WrestleTix. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 shows announced, 7 shows with a WrestleTix count. United Center latest count is 8,200. 8,200 tickets out for the United Center with the return of CM Punk. And then the following show at Scotiabank Arena the night before Forbidden Door, still under 2,000, 1,800 out. Hamilton, Ontario at Cops Coliseum, 800 is the count. 800, under 1,000. Regina, Saskatchewan the following week, about 1,300 out. Calgary, Alberta, about 3,400 out. Newark, New Jersey at the Prudential Center, 4,100 out. That is the highest of the shows other than in the United Center. And then Greenville, South Carolina with about 1,400 out. So it has been said that these are not great. I would say that these are not great. The United Center show is okay at this point. I think it'll probably, with the final days of ticket sales, which is this coming week, I imagine it'll get right up to about 10,000 or so.
Which
These
will
other,
be one of the biggest, probably one of the 5 biggest attended shows of the year for AEW. I think it'll be the biggest attended show of the year for AEW if it gets to 10,000 so far.
that's a good way to spin it. And I think, these other numbers, they're not special events. They're not, this return of CM Punk will be a special newsworthy event. You may
In
have some
Chicago.
in Chicago. They may have some traveling fans for this, probably not a lot. It's definitely not. I would think that second Rampage, I bet you had a lot of people out of market coming into the United Center to see CM Punk's return after however many years. But they're going to Toronto, and to think that you've probably got a lot of people coming in from out of town to go to the Toronto Forbidden Door show the following night. But it's literally, like what, I don't know, it's not a tenth, but it's a small fraction of what the Forbidden Door show has in terms of tickets out.
Oh, I think the Toronto show is like a disaster. I think it's worse than the
Yeah.
Hamilton show
Really, why is that?
because you have a ton of fans in the market, many of whom are flying in or traveling in.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be a day before Forbidden Door. It's going to essentially be a go home show for Forbidden Door. I imagine there's people would assume that there's going to be New Japan Pro Wrestling talent on that show. It's
You
not
would
going to be like a
think
typical.
that they'd be
It's
in
not
town
going to.
already.
Yeah, it's not going to be a typical Collision. I mean, even if you, I mean, Toronto is one of their best markets realistically, as far as to sell tickets in. And you're going to have CM Punk on that show, I presume. Maybe they have a lot of walk-ups because people will be around. Uh, but I would think that that number is very disappointing. I mean, even when you look at like Rampage is the show that obviously is a B show that people don't view as nearly as important as Dynamite or anything like that. But even the live rampages that they do, which are the day before, 2 days before a pay per view event, those will still do significantly better than 1,800 fans. Um, I don't know what's going on with that Toronto show. I figured they would sell a lot of tickets based on how many people are already going to be in the area
Yeah.
for
I
such
will
a
give
big
them
show.
this. Like this was announced. This was added later after Forbidden Door. If this had been announced in conjunction with Forbidden Door tickets on sale, it would do better, I would think.
Yeah, but like
Yeah.
how, like what Jesse said, how many of those fans are coming in and they add additional events? We see it all the time when like GCW run shows or like that, like where those will draw well because those fans are in town. They're like, oh, let's watch more wrestling. The
Mhm.
fact that this has done significantly worse than the piggyback Rampage shows is really alarming. I think they need to start officially announcing some New Japan talent probably for that show in order to improve ticket sales.
That would help. Gull, are you
Well,
going to any of these Toronto shows?
As of right now, no, but
Are you
like
gonna, the Hamilton one is closer to us. You want to make it 801?
maybe we'll do Hamilton. Actually, I'm not booked that day, so maybe maybe
Okay.
we'll do 80. We'll be 801 and 802.
Okay. Go, Jesse. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say maybe like we'll see what happens with the Collision debut. Maybe that they shoot a big angle with CM Punk. I imagine that's probably what the plan is, and we'll see if they I guess to the typical wrestling fan, maybe not the super hardcore fan, but your typical wrestling fan. The idea that CM Punk is going to be on Collision and only on Collision has not really been advertised or presented to them. That's something that we are led to believe uh, is
Mhm.
is the plan. Is that CM Punk is going to be like on Collision, and there's going to be this soft brand split. Um, but if you're a regular fan, you just know that CM Punk is going to be on that first Collision, but you probably assume CM Punk is going to be on Dynamite on Wednesday too, because he's CM Punk. He'd be on all the shows. Um, if something where they kind of hammer home the idea that like CM Punk and maybe these other wrestlers, they're only going to be on Collision. So if you want to see them, Collision's the place to be. Not only does that make all CM Punk fans want to go see Collision because that's the only place they know they're going to see them, but it also presents Collision as this significant major show and not like another version of Rampage, but a real A show on par with Dynamite. Maybe that helps sell some of these tickets further
Yeah.
once you kind of establish the idea that Collision is the CM Punk show and it's going to have CM Punk and these other big stars and they're going to be feuding on this show,
Yeah. At least
and that's the
like
only place you see them.
for my own taste, I guess. Like I'm going to the Forbidden Door show, and it's a 2 hour drive from Buffalo. I can't imagine what would make me want to go to Collision the night before. Like I can't imagine what could possibly happen on June 17th on the first Collision that's going to make me and if I'm an indicator of any wider interest, like what could possibly happen that's going to drive people who are already going to, and this is sort of around travel plans too, I think, but because you've already made your travel plans to come in, say, late Saturday or early Sunday, and so getting to this other show is not as convenient.
I mean, what if there's a CM Punk and FTR versus Okada Tanahashi and Ishii.
That's better. Yeah.
What if you're
Yeah.
booked? What if you're booked to wrestle Yuji Nagata on that episode of Collision?
I'm not currently accepting bookings, so I don't know what you can do about it. And then we should note this Hamilton show has a Dynamite 2 days prior. 2 days prior,
Right. That's
that right?
the takeaway I've
Or
heard.
the
about
1 day
that
prior.
Hamilton
I keep
show
messing this up. Yeah.
Is that because Hamilton is obviously close to Toronto,
Yes.
that it's just the reason. One of the reasons that Hamilton show only has 800 tickets out is just they're going to completely exhaust the Toronto area market
Yeah.
by that point.
They're not far away at all.
Yeah.
Like,
What would you say? Hamilton is a 1 hour drive from Buffalo, I would say, and then it's 2 hours
Yeah.
to Toronto, so it's 1 hour from Toronto to Hamilton.
yeah, and then when you like fly out of Mississauga, which is like the first Toronto airport, that's like 20 minutes outside of Hamilton. So that's not even like, when you think about that, the first Toronto airport is like 20 minutes outside of Hamilton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, AW Collision. It's the discourse we've all been waiting for. Let's make some predictions about what AEW's. Well, a couple things. What is AEW's Collision? What is AEW Collision's first TV rating on Saturday night? And let's think about what competition might be on Saturday night already. I'm not aware of any, but maybe you guys know sports better. And let's say what does it do for a July average? And then let's be adventurous and do a August average as well. And for reference, I brought out the Rampage numbers, the monthly averages for Rampage and what they did for each month and what the month-to-month differences were as that show basically settled. It started out, as people know, quite strongly, 800,000 in August, 600,000 in September, and it basically flattened out to about 500,000 by December. So it took, 4 months or so to really normalize into at least, a normalized viewership for that time, and then it's continued to decline since then. We're not going that far into the future to make a judgment about whether this is really going to fall off into a B show or not, but just for some reference on how Rampage settled down. So, first question. June 17th, AW Collision debut. Is there any competition, and what does Collision do for a total viewership and for a demo rating?
I don't think
As
there's
far
gonna
as
be much
competition, yeah. Oh, go ahead, sorry, Justin.
Yeah, I was
Is
just neither of the Stanley Cup or the NBA Finals, if they're even still going at that point, which they might not be, are going to be.
The U.S. Open is the only major sporting event going on during that.
And that won't be on during the nighttime.
Yeah.
Okay. So no serious competition comes to mind. Okay, let's do Gullo first. P2 Plus and P1849.
Oh, man. Well, I'm trying to like.
I
I'd
know
say
you're
they'll
researching this
do.
all week.
Yeah, I'd say they'll do 650
$650.
with the P2 Plus, and as far as 18 to 49, let's go. This is gonna be hard. Maybe 250 might be too low, but 250.
250. What is that? 0.20
Yeah.
or 0.25?
Yeah.
What are you saying?
Yeah, it's pretty.
Do you understand the metric that we're using here?
Yes, yes, I get the. Yeah,
demo rate.
yeah, that might be too high. Let's go 200. 200. That might be too high.
0.20.
Yes, 0.20.
Okay.
I don't.
Adjusted.
It's Saturday night, man.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to be a little bit more optimistic than Gullo. I'm going to say 715,000 total viewers.
15 or 50?
15.
15.
715. And I'll say a 0.27 in the key demo.
Yeah. Okay. I think a good over under is whatever Dynamite's doing. Like can you see this doing similar to what a Dynamite does? I guess.
I mean, I have it a little bit under that, but
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of interest in the debut of Collision. Whether or not that's followed up in any way, shape, or form, I do think that fans are going to view that as a significant show.
Okay. I was without knowing what you guys would predict, I would go higher. But you're scaring me. But let's pretend I didn't hear you. I would say I don't know what did Dynamite do over the last few weeks. I know this past week was pretty good considering there was NBA Finals going up against it. But let's see. Let's say its June average is what for Dynamite? 903. Prior month May was 847. Let's go what it did in May. 847,000 viewers. And what did it do for an 18 to 49? It did 391. So let's do 391 divided by the universe. That's a 0.30. Is that crazy? 0.30? That's what I would do. You guys scared me, and if makes me think I'm going too high. But
I mean, I think the night is the Saturday night. I just don't know what the interest level on Saturday night can be.
The Saturday time slot scares me.
I think it could be number one for Saturday night in 18 to 49 with no significant sports competition.
Have we looked at like what non-sports do on a Saturday night?
I'm going to pull up Showbiz Daily here. So look at the most recent Saturdays. Some of this will have sports competitions, so I'm going to open a bunch of them. So this past Saturday, so we don't have this most recent Saturday because the ratings aren't out yet, but Saturday, June 3rd. Saturday, June 3rd, we did have Stanley Cup Finals. We had UFC Fight Night, did a 0.28 for UFC Fight Night. Formula One, why not sharing it here? Formula One did 0.28 qualifying. This looks like a pre-show. College Softball World Series did a 0.22. And then we have what else here? For the prior Saturday, May 27th, NBA playoffs did a big number inside the NBA pregame Formula One qualifying, and this is in the morning, right? And probably what was the other one? That was also in the morning, 9:54 a.m. start. If we look at something like, we have a lot of college softball here doing in the teens. One doing a 0.22. If we look here, we have NHL playoffs doing a 0.46. PGA Championship at 10 a.m. on ESPN doing a 0.23. Sports Center Liga playoffs at 8:42 doing a 0.19. Premier League in the morning doing a 0.17. I think.
And all that stuff is gone. All the soccer stuff is over.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure actually.
The men's college World Series is that weekend too, so I don't know if that
the men's what?
College World Series will be next weekend as well, around the same time as Collision. So
yeah.
I didn't know softball did that.
Is the U.S. Open going to be on cable? I don't think it is. I think it's going to be on. I don't know who has the rights. If ESPN has it, then it will be. But if it's CBS or NBC or one of those places, it won't be on cable. That would do bigger than U.S. Open coverage would do bigger than Collision. But other than that, I mean, I don't know if Liga MX is still going right now, but I know the major European leagues are all done, soccer wise.
Okay, I'm just looking at TV guides to see if I can get any sense of what else is on TV, but it's not really working out. Okay, so that's our predictions for AEW Collision ratings. We switch back again. If you want to submit a super chat, if you're watching live on YouTube, if you want to hear your question read on air. And now we are going to go to Google Trends, which we have not visited in a while. Just for a quick update on wrestling companies worldwide. WWE is flattening out and back on a positive trend. It's got these are standardized values, relative values, as a percentage of the max. So WWE is at a 40 with the most recent month. AEW is at a 5. Remember, this is worldwide. New Japan is at a 2. Stardom and Impact both at a 1. So again, WWE at a 40. If we take away WWE, so we can look at things at a finer granularity, we have AEW at a 46. New Japan worldwide at a 19. Stardom above Impact with an 8. And Impact with a 6. So as we can see, AEW on the decline in worldwide Google web search. New Japan pretty flat. We'll look at other geographies here too. United States only. You can see a pretty positive trend here in the last, and this dashed line in all cases is a 12-month trailing average. So we're looking at everything in a moving whole year. But WWE 63, AEW 12. So you could think of whatever 12 is divided by 63. That's the percentage to which there is more. That's like almost 6 times, less than 6 times, but about 5 times. Let's say there's 5 times the search for WWE than there is for AEW in the United States. Impact is a 2 by that comparison. Is it different in Canada? Not really. It's virtually the same. Is it different in the UK? Somewhat, yeah. We get WWE at a 55 rather than a 63, and AEW at an 11. And that's consistent with, AEW's on a better television network, ITV, right? So maybe AEW just has greater exposure relative to WWE versus the way things are in the United States or in Canada for that matter. Australia. W's at a 44, AEW at a 6. So I would say if there is a market that is more hardcore, and this would also maybe skewed a bit by the fact that there's the Wembley show announcement that may be driving more search for AEW in the United Kingdom. But Australia, I would say, is pretty similar by proportion to the United States and Canada as it concerns WWE and AEW. India, WWE at a 20, AEW at a 1. And Mexico, WWE is the most searched for. We got some big jumps here, which tells me there's not a lot of granularity here, and maybe this data is not of great quality. So we do have we exclude WWE, and we can look more specifically at CMLL and AEW and AAA, and we have CMLL in the middle of last year surpassing AAA, Lucha Libre, AAA Worldwide. Consejo de Mundial de Lucha Libre. I said that wrong. I forget where the date is.
I told you. As I mentioned on the show, CMLL is back.
Well, CMLL has definitely exceeded in web search for what it's worth. There's more people searching in Mexico for AAA than for CMLL than for AAA. Yes.
Mystico, the original Mystico, is back.
He's back.
CMLL,
with his real original name. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, I mean, what this web chart shows you is just a massive impact that the pandemic had on popularity of promotions.
Yeah. And if we look at Japan, New Japan, of course, is number 1. They're rated at a 62 to Stardom's 28 to WWE's 10. And we can see, as probably coinciding with the timing of when WWE lost their television, I think they're on Samurai TV. They have minimal TV exposure now in Japan, WWE does. And Stardom has been on the upward trajectory for the last few years. It's really flattening out. Their growth has pretty much flattened here. Relative to what it was doing in the last couple of years. But New Japan by far number 1. If we look at a more granular look and throw in a couple more promotions, we get Noah behind Stardom next, and Dragon Gate is next behind Noah. And this is just for people watching video, an illustration of WWE versus everybody else. WWE's a big circle. AEW is a much smaller circle. That's, I don't know, a sixth of what WWE is in terms of worldwide search volume. And these are year-over-year differences. So as we can see, AEW is down 23% year-to-date versus last year, January to May. New Japan is up. This is worldwide. New Japan is up 13%. Stardom is up only 5%. As I said, there's still growth, but that growth has slowed for Stardom. And that's
with I guess Mercedes Moné was in New Japan too, but
yeah. We could look at US, but I don't have that prepared. Yeah. Any thoughts? Excuse me. Any thoughts on that?
Not really. Just seems to reflect kind of other trends that we've seen, and as you mentioned, that WWE up, AEW down. Japan and Mexico kind of bouncing back from where they were during the pandemic years, but the damage from the pandemic still obviously a big factor in wrestling in both those countries.
Yes. So those are all the slides that I have. If you guys have anything,
you don't have an update on our ELO. Nick Aldis got a big win on Impact
If,
wrestling.
if you have another topic
Yeah, the
to bring up,
841 match or whatever it's called.
if you have a
Hey,
big topic to bring up, I can run the numbers right now.
he beat Moose and Rich Swan. Got the pin on Rich Swan.
Are you not tracking it yourself in your own
No,
handwritten
I'm
scorecard?
not. I happened to come across Impact Wrestling, which I don't regularly watch, and I saw the main event, and I saw Nick Aldis win.
Okay.
And I was thinking that's good for my yellow rating. I gambled on Nick Aldis getting a big push, which I know he's going to get an Impact. So,
Okay. Any other topics to bring up as I'm calculating this in the background?
I mean, we mentioned it before, but I think it's going to be very interesting once we get to the summer. You look at what is beating wrestling shows on cable overall. It's the NHL, it's the NBA, both of which are going to be done by the end of this next week. On like Wednesday nights, it's like Vanderpump Rules, which is I believe also finally wrapping up.
Yep.
You said that
so
very quickly, Gull. Are you watching Vanderpump Rules?
I'm not a Vanderpump Rule, but I have friends that are Vanderpump Rules. I actually have a friend. She's a local comedian that hosts Vanderpump Rule parties. Like she does stand up
It's a
before them,
party.
they do a watching party. Yeah, they do it at a brewery out here. It's crazy.
Is this
it's
common
Roswell.
around the country? Really?
Yeah.
And that would reflect the strong live and same day viewership that we see in the Nielsen ratings via Showbiz Daily.
So people are going to bars and like watching.
Yeah, so like there's a brewery here called Southern Tier Brewery, and they do a big watch party. They at least did it with the like Vanderpump, like when they got all the cast together or whatever.
Is that actually in the Southern Tier? This is a
No, it's in downtown Buffalo, but it was big. It started in like Lakewood, but now they're all over.
Right.
Like there's one in Charlotte,
okay.
there's one in
Locations
Cleveland, yeah.
downtown.
But yeah, they have a big watch party for Vanderpump Rules.
What could AEW or WWE learn from what you're describing? Where's the Nitro parties? Is what I'm getting at here.
I mean, people don't really watch paper. Well, see, WWE pay-per-views and bars were a thing for years. Bars and restaurants.
Wild Wings,
and
Buffalo Wild Wings. Let's go to
Quaker Steak and Lube. That was a big thing too.
I remember that.
Yeah, and the blast zones. That's what they call them. WWE blast zones. But since the network and then Peacock, like that kind of died out, and AEW doesn't. I mean, that could be something AEW should look into. Is partnering with maybe national chain restaurants and bars and doing a big deal, and then maybe in the big markets sending like a star they're not using in a while, or like a Mark Henry. Mark Henry is going to be at this, AEW like pay-per-view watch party in Toronto or something.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that my point was I think we're going to be heading into some summer months here where wrestling ratings are going to be, even if they don't go up just by the state of competition, they're going to be number one for large portions of the week. I mean, nothing is probably going to beat Raw on Monday nights over the next few months with no real live sports competition until football. Dynamite, obviously, with Vanderpump and other sports competition wrapping up, Dynamite has a very good chance of being number one on Wednesday nights. SmackDown is probably going to continue to be number one on Friday nights.
Is Real Housewives going to be out there?
Real Housewives, I think. I don't know what like the Real Housewives like a schedule, like if their season is wrapping up or what. But SmackDown's going to be number one on Friday nights. Pretty confident in that. And we talked about Collision perhaps being number one on Saturday nights as a real possibility, especially for the first few months or so of Collision. NXT cracked the top 5 on Tuesday nights, right?
NXT's been ranking very well. It ranked number 4 2 weeks ago, which is tied for its highest ranking ever. Its highest ranking ever up to that point was the first episode in September 2019.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and we could talk about NXT a little bit. Like, they're clearly making an attempt to, I think, boost NXT with contract negotiation season starting. And Nick Khan's talked about it a lot. I think the idea is they want NXT to be a real viable.
And NXT's going to expire this year.
Yeah, and they want NXT to be a real viable thing that people are going to pay real money to get on their network, whether that's NBCU or someone else. And I think you can see that by more main roster stars making an appearance. I know Braun Breaker called out Seth Rollins, I think. on the most
Baron
recent
Corbin's
episode.
there.
I think
Dana Brooke just showed up. Yeah.
yeah, they're trying to do that. I know Nick Khan was trying to rewrite history earlier, and Hollywood Reporter story that came out earlier this week about NXT's
It was
history.
just, I saw it. It was just a comment from, it was something that he had said. He was being quoted from the probably the
yes,
JP
which
Morgan
was
or the
probably
McKinsey
from a
thing.
press release that was sent to the Hollywood Reporter.
Could be. Uh, but yeah, I don't know the context of what he was saying, whether he was saying exactly how it read or not. But he was basically saying that they had always been on Tuesdays. It was being read as if they were always on Tuesdays, and they did this to address the pandemic, which is obviously not the case. They moved in
Well, it's a
fall of
complete
2019.
false. It's a complete false history of NXT. It says that, and NXT was on Tuesdays. It was on the WWE Network, and then during the middle of the pandemic, NBCU came to WWE and said, "We need more content." They said, "We got it. We got you covered. We'll move NXT to USA on Tuesday nights, just where it's always been," which is just a complete false history.
I think you
the
can
Hollywood
say in hindsight, wow, we helped
context.
them. We helped them deal with the problems that television faced during COVID by giving them TV that was live and not interrupted.
Right. I guess I would like to see the Hollywood Reporter actually push back against that and provide any form of context instead of just adding Nick Khan tweets to a story, or Nick Khan comments to a story about NXT. But anyway, my point is that we're looking at where wrestling is going to be dominating the cable charts. Probably it's already faring very well, but you take away both the NHL and the NBA playoffs, you take away maybe Vanderpump Rules, maybe some other shows that place highly are going to be wrapping up as we head into the summer. Obviously, maybe some other reality shows or things like that might pop up during the summer that might be able to be competitive with wrestling. But we're heading into a period, especially with both AEW and WWE looking at their next TV deals, where wrestling is really going to be the highest rated stuff on cable and has the potential to be the number one rated show on cable in 18 to 49 for four nights of the week or so. And what does that mean for upcoming contract television negotiations? What does that mean for the health of the industry? What does that mean for popularity of pro wrestling? It's a good. I think it's obviously a good thing for the wrestling companies. I think we're looking at a period over the next few months where wrestling is going to be the most relevant programming on television.
Yeah, I guess if I'm a TV executive and if I understand, Nielsen ratings, then I know that this should be a better season than the rest of the year for wrestling in terms of where it ranks. So I would keep that in mind while looking at the entire picture of what you're doing in ratings lately and how that adds value to the network.
And again, a huge part of the value of the television rights to whether it's Raw, SmackDown, Dynamite, Collision, NXT, whatever, is you're getting the 52 weeks a year first run programming. You don't get that in sports, and you don't get that with scripted television. And that value really shows in the summer months where there's not a lot of first run programming.
And I know we're stalling here because of the ELO, but we're currently in the 50s here. It's going to take like half an hour to really update. But we can see did we see higher rankings here in the previous summer? We did see a higher. If we look over here, I won't see it, but if the gray bubbles for Dynamite are higher in the summer months versus what they did later. Then again, they had better ratings probably back then too. So we'll see if they actually equal their rankings of summer of last year. Yeah. Anything to plug?
I had a Gentleman's Wrestling podcast. We had an episode that went up earlier this week. I had Joe Lanza from the Flagship Wrestling Podcast back on the show. And we talked a lot about wrestling criticism and kind of the decline and absence of what I would call good faith or constructive criticism towards professional wrestling, and kind of how the environment has changed with social media.
It used to be better. Did wrestling criticism used to be better?
I don't know if it used to be better. but I do think that it's different now with, especially with social media, especially with Twitter, especially with the amount of concern trolls and bad faith artists that are out there that muddy the waters for real criticism. I think creates an environment where people become extremely dismissive of anything that's critical because there's an army of trolls out there that are going to make the same point, even if your point is in good faith and theirs is not. Um, Obviously, the tribalism is different. It's a really good discussion. It's gotten great reviews, I think. Just kind of talking about um, can you be, is there room and space for real criticism in pro wrestling these days? And um, talent takes things personally, promoters take things personally. Um, it does seem like it's a different environment than it used to be, but it probably was never great.
I guess I think the access that everyone has and the elevation that any engaged with piece of content, whether it's a tweet or whatever, can get highlighted by is it aggravates the polarization that comes with two very competitive brands, although they are, many widths apart from each other in W and AEW. But I think that aggravates the contentiousness and the insanity around a lot of wrestling.
I think yeah, I think that if I were to say something critical of AEW, people will see that, and many people will easily dismiss that as, oh, you're just a hater, you love WWE or whatever. Things that are not true, and people that know me know is not true, but people will use that to dismiss my criticism, and that exists because there are many people out there that are like that are making criticisms that are not in good faith and that are not constructive. And there's a whole pushback for, like, I don't want to necessarily call it toxic positivity, but the idea that it's unfair to judge people for their work, and push back against that. It happens a lot, especially on the indies.
You're talking about like criticizing wrestlers' performances?
Yeah, like say that this wrestler isn't very good. This match wasn't very good. This promo.
Have you ever been in a ring? Have you ever had matches?
I have not. So I guess
well,
I'm.
Your opinion doesn't matter then.
Yeah. Well, people. People can say my opinion doesn't matter. I have no authority over people's view on my opinion mattering or not. But it's kind of like, I don't know. I guess like every single person that watches wrestling is being critical of it in some way, and if they think it's bad, they're probably not going to watch it. So it's foolish to live in a world where, like, oh, you shouldn't vocalize your criticisms because, it's not fair to criticize somebody. But that's what everyone does with everything that they do. It's not just wrestling. It could be, if I listen to music, I'd be like, this music is bad. I'm not listening to this anymore. I don't.
Have you ever played music? Have you ever created a record? Have you ever made an album? Where's your album?
I have not. No.
Well, even though you're the one that's paying for it and buying, I think was litigated for me, like 7 years ago, that whose opinions matter are the customers more than the wrestlers. Like, you've got certain wrestlers out there saying, well, this Bret Hart liked my match, so I don't care what the fans say, and I understand that to an extent. You don't want to listen to people who don't have good advice, but there's a critical mass that gets reached eventually, where, like, this is not just a few people who don't represent the masses, that maybe this is representative of an actual significant portion of the audience. There's a fine line between being selective about who you listen to and deluding yourself.
And in that specific example, like, what is Bret Hart's value in his opinion, right? Bret Hart liked my match. What does that mean to a wrestler, realistically? What are they saying?
They think that they respect Bret Hart's opinion over, like, Joe, who paid $20 for a ticket.
Right, but why would you respect Bret Hart's opinion? What does Bret Hart have?
He should be an expert. He should be an expert.
Right. An expert in what?
The excellence of execution.
But an expert in being a successful professional wrestler that had many, many fans and was able to convey a story and emotions through his wrestling work. Mm-hmm. So the reason you're excited that Bret Hart liked your wrestling match is because Bret Hart is an experienced person that understands what it takes to get over with an audience. So I wouldn't necessarily value his opinion over the mass audience because they're connected,
Yeah.
right? Bret Hart is supposed to. You're trusting that Bret Hart knows what is going to get over with an audience. So if he likes your match, that means good. That means
There's there's an analogy I could cross into stand-up comedy. So there's a thing called the comics comic, right? So that you think that's the greatest compliment. Like, wow, comedians love this comic. Those are the ones that usually don't make it because the crowd's not laughing, but that back row of all the comedians hanging out are losing it.
Well, you want to
Like-
pop the boy. You want to pop the
Yeah.
boys in the back.
Yeah.
Go. I think some people sometimes called me a wrestler's wrestler. What are you trying to say here?
I mean, the wrestlers love watching you, but I mean, Brandon, I bring announced a lot of your stuff. I watched a lot of your stuff. Like you would look at the crowd, you look at emotion, but there is people that go out there just to wrestle, to have a good match, to make that their opponent think it's a good match, and really not care about the crowd. I've seen it time and time again on indie shows. Like it connecting to crowd and connecting to the masses is not a priority on some talents. And I think you see it on a national TV basis sometimes too, in all companies.
Yes, I think one of the greatest challenges for a wrestler and for anybody who's booking or contributing to creative or trying to analyze creative is reading what the results mean. And I think like looking at quarter hours is an example of that. You know, you can listen to the anecdotes of one person's opinion, and that may or may not lead you to good advice. It may or may not be truthful or wise. You want to look at the objective metrics, but you can easily delude yourself and tell yourself a story about why this result is actually affirming what you did rather than repudiating what you did. So I don't know how to explain it other than you have to look at this stuff with a level head, and you have to I think it's healthy to approach your own work with a healthy amount of self-criticism. And on the other hand, there have been people who are, who probably love their own work and are their own biggest fans or are a mark for themselves, who've been very successful regardless. So it's not a deal breaker, but I think if you're going to understand whether what you're doing is successful or not, you have to have a level head. What does that mean? I don't know if that's any less ambiguous than analyzing the quarter hours themselves, but it's really easy to delude yourself and to listen to people who affirm you and to ad hominem dismiss criticisms from people who you don't think are experts. And yeah, go ahead.
And we talked about this a lot. We mentioned this when we were talking about like TNA earlier and kind of mistakes that TNA made. And one of the big mistakes that TNA made was, especially during like that early 2010s period with Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff and those people involved, was a resistance to what fans seemed to respond to versus what the people who were in charge thought was needed to be done to become a successful wrestling product, which was in a lot of cases pushing not only older wrestlers but wrestlers who fit a certain aesthetic model versus the wrestlers that fans are responding to. There's the famous thing where they brought in Nigel McGuinness from the Independents, and he kind of Desmond Wolfe, and he quickly got over with the fans, and they had some sort of fan poll where they wanted to. It was like, I don't know, you're going to vote like who's going to get the next title shot, and he won it. And like the management was very mad because they didn't think that Desmond Wolfe was an actual top star. Even if the fans voted and said they think that he's a top star, he didn't look like it. They wanted to push Matt Morgan, or they wanted to push Crimson or Gunner or one of these
because
guys.
That's what would actually attract a wider audience. This is what our hardcore fans want, who are always going to be there no matter how much they kick and scream and whine. They're always going to be there bitching and moaning. But we have to get the Walmart fans who aren't in our pockets.
We need
already.
someone who passes the airport test.
Yes, and that's Matt Morgan, not Desmond Wolfe.
Right. And it was coming into it with the confirmation bias of this is what fans want. And even though fans say something else, that's wrong. We know best because we're experienced wrestling minds and we've had success in this business in some form. And that leads to a lot of mistakes being made. I think. I mean, I was thinking about this with like I wrote about this week for voiceofwrestling.com. I wrote an article about Orange Cassidy and his title reign right now with the AEW International Championship and kind of the story that he's telling there. And part of it is the humor in this guy who was brought into AEW as like kind of the penultimate. Not penultimate, the real significant number one, like kind of comedy meme indie wrestler, right? This guy who works heavy comedy gimmick that got over on the independents big, and AEW signed him, and it was kind of like AEW signing this guy, the comedy guy who puts his hand in his pockets. How is that going to work with the mainstream audience? I don't think that's something that works on the indies, doesn't work in the, you know, on a national television promotion. And the truth is that his act got over bigger with fans who maybe were not as hardcore wrestling fans. And the funny thing is that now he is like the like out of all the wrestlers that are on television each week in any promotion, I feel like Orange Cassidy is basically the most traditional meat and potatoes style wrestler in that he wrestles a good match every week. He sells a ton. He's telling a long-term story where he's held the title for a long time, but he's being worn down in his defenses. His matches are dramatic. The fans are into them. And when he eventually does lose the title, it's going to feel like a significant event because of the work that he's done. And it's funny that the guy that's doing that is the guy that everyone was like, this guy's like, you can't put this guy on television because he's so atypical of what a traditional wrestler is supposed to be. And I do think that there's a lot of lessons to be learned in that, especially when it comes to non-fans.
Okay. I think that's all for this week. We will be back. I will be back with John Pollock on the Post Wrestling feed and on the WrestleNomics radio feed and on both of our YouTube channels, middle of the week sometime, with a guest. And we'll be back here Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And just a reminder, we are going to Patreon beginning July 9th. This will be the only way to listen to every episode of WrestleNomics Radio. We still have the first Sunday of each month free, but the rest of the weeks in the month, the rest of the episodes in the month will be on Patreon only. So you can sign up to that for $5 a month, plus everything else that's part of the WrestleNomics Patreon. If you don't like it, this is all Golo's idea. So we'll talk to you next time.